And now to my next guest. Here's a question. What are the Beatles, Stones, Kiss, Jimi Hendrix, Bowie, Kinks, John Mellencamp, Santana, John Mayall, Joe Cocker, Carly Simon, Dionne Warwick, Martha Hoople, and Twisted Sister have in common? Well, if your answer is that we all use the same mascara, you may be partially right, but that's really not the answer. The answer is my next guest, who is one of the legends in the music industry, someone I've known for a very long time, someone I'm really happy is on the show, Mr. Eddie Kramer. Hey, Eddie, how are you?
Good afternoon, old chap. How are you?
And he has yet to have a Canadian accent. So tell me, you're living in Canada now, is that correct?
Yes, I am. And by the way, JJ, I have to say to you, a big thank you. You've been a tremendous friend over the years, and I have only great memories of those early sessions where I tried to kill you and the whole band, and the band tried to kill me, which was that's another story for another day. But it's wonderful to be on your show, and thanks for the invite.
Okay. So tell me about why you're in Canada and how that whole move happened, because you were in California for 1,000,000 years, basically.
500,000 years, but yes. I was invited to come to Toronto to try to restore and rebuild the El Macombo Club, where I recorded the Stones in '77 for Love You Live.
That's a famous gig too.
It was a famous gig. There's a lot of stuff that was going on there, which actually will be in my book, which I heard you talking about your book. I think I can throw mine in.
Please be my guest.
Into the camp. It's called From the Other Side of the Glass. And it's a work in progress right now. As you know, books, well, anybody who tries to write a book, good luck, because you really have to dig deep. And that's the thing. And I'm working on digging deep to find the stories that maybe are not so pleasant, because I think just to, put all the facts out there, that's not very interesting. People want to know what happened and how come somebody tried to throw you off a session or did throw you off a session.
Are you using a co-writer, by the way? Do you have somebody that's writing with you, or is this all you, nothing but you?
It's all, for now, it's all me. I will get a really good editor, hopefully. But that's the thing, working on a book about your life and how you started in the business and who you worked with and when and why. I've got that all organized. I have about 31 chapters that I'm trying to pull together. The good news is that I do have a lot of photographs of these artists, fortunately. As I was working with them, I was managed to take some pictures. So that's going to help. There'll be a second book with a separate photographic book. But more than that, we've been offered a fabulous deal to do a documentary movie. And I have some partners in that. There's a guy you may have heard of, Spencer Proffer,
sure,
well-known producer, and he's doing documentaries, and we're working together on that. And we have a deal with a really lovely media company in New York that owns Rolling Stone and Variety, and they've offered to come on board and help us, which is wonderful. So that's what's going on here. So to go back to your first question as to why I came to Canada to try to put this club together, I did that to the best of my ability, and it was a very expensive build. I brought in my very dear friend John Storick, the architect. He and I built Electric Lady Studios together, and I remember you guys came down there.
Yeah, so we actually, if I'm not mistaken, we were the break-in band, right? Because I think you had Hal Selby, if I'm not mistaken, had just bought it or something and wanted you to test it.
You weren't the break-in band. Okay. You were much later. It opened in 1970 with Jimmy.
Okay. No, that I know that. No, I meant the rebuild. I'm sorry. I thought we came in after they had redone the studio or something, and that was my.
Well, unfortunately, we won't
dignify this conversation. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Okay. And that's the same thing with this bloody thing that I did with the El Macombo. I'm no longer involved with them. There's some legal action going on, which I'm very unfortunate, but those are the things that go on in life, and you move forward. And here I am, about 2.5 hours away from Toronto. And it's a really beautiful place called Prince Edward County. And you're looking at my office, which is my studio. And I mix from here. I produce from here. Because of COVID, I've had to make a 180-degree pivot and sort of completely embrace the digital world. And here I am mixing and producing, and just got my first COVID shot, thank God.
I got my two.
Congratulations.
Which is good, and I didn't have a reaction to either one. So
Great.
so much for the myth of that. I did the Pfizer one.
Yeah,
Isn't
me
it
too.
interesting? That's the subject that everybody talks about. That is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, isn't it?
It's important. We got to do this, otherwise you can see what's going on. I mean, we just literally got shut down again in Ontario, the whole province of Ontario, including Toronto, where we shut it down another month. It's driving people crazy. I understand the frustration, but if you don't get your damn vaccine, we're going to have this shit all over again.
Yeah. And the problem with this disease, it's so confounding because you're a human being's response to the disease could be anywhere from nothing, like totally asymptomatic, to death, and everywhere in between. My wife just got over it, and she had a mild case, luckily, on a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 3. But she had a case of it. And, we went out to dinner exactly one time, and we think that's where it happened. I mean, we've been home, not doing anything for month after month after month after month after month. It's crazy. So let me talk about this. Behind you, of course, are Jimi Hendrix albums. And while you're associated with some of the greatest names in the history of the music business, the one most associated with you is Jimi. I want to talk to you a little bit about Jimi, and I want to clear up something in my head, in my memory, and maybe you can help me with this. Okay. I remember seeing Jimi for the first time at Madison Square Garden, and it was not a good show. He walked off stage after about 6 songs. He was frustrated. He asked people to stop flashing light bulbs. It was in his eyes. The stage was, before they built the stage at the end of the arena, it was in the middle, which means that the amp stacks crossed the entire circular stage. It looked like a lazy Susan, and the only way you could hear Jimi is if you actually walked around the arena and to stay in front of the stage. And he got very upset and left, and it was very unsatisfying. Is my memory correct about that show?
Yeah, you're correct. There were 2 performances. That one, which unfortunately, I believe something happened backstage. Who knows who did what? His drink was spiked with acid, and it was a bad acid thing, and he was very upset.
That's why he asked people to stop with the flash bulbs. Am I correct?
Exactly. Yes.
I had heard rumors to that effect. So you're saying he probably was high on acid at the time, is what you're thinking?
Yes, but it wasn't of his own doing. Okay. I don't think he would have sabotaged his own show.
Right.
Who knows who did it? But that's part of historical sort of information.
Right. And there was a riot at the show. If I remember correctly, he walked off stage and people were throwing chairs and people freaked out. And I remember thinking, here's a guy who was like the greatest guitar player in the world. What an unfortunate set of circumstances led to this kind of mess. Yeah. But it did happen. Okay.
It did. However, there was another concert in '69 that I was very fortunate to go to. And the history of that one is kind of fun. I know exactly the date and the time because it was November 27th, 1969. I get a phone call, and it was very unusual for me to get a phone call from Jimi. Hey man, what's happening? Hey, you want to go to the Rolling Stones, Madison Square Garden tonight? Yeah. Okay, yes, Jimi, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. So he said, well, meet me at the backstage door. So I jump in.
Well, that was the famous Thanksgiving shows in November of '69 for the Stones.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was at all 3 of those shows, by the way.
Well, yeah, but this is how the whole thing comes about, is that he invites me, we meet at the backstage and we go up in the elevator and everybody knows everybody, of course, the Stones and Jimi are old friends. And it was just wonderful, backstage talking to all the folks that I know there, the Stones and everything. And I have this beautiful shot of Mick and Jimi sitting on a bench, basically in the dressing room, with the concrete blocks behind them and the hangers and where you hang your clothes and everything. And it's just pretty. primitive, but it's such a beautiful shot, and I treasure that. It's like these two iconic, wonderful rock personas sitting together, just talking, and it always stuck in my mind. Geez, if I'd only had a video camera. Apparently, there was somebody shooting 16 mil. There is actually some 16 mil shots of that whole backstage episode.
The Maisels, maybe, you think?
I think it was. I believe it might have been, yes.
Okay.
But part of that in my head is also following up with, there was a show that Jimmy did do in November that I did go to and take pictures of him backstage just by himself with a flying V, practicing blues. Right. And that show was a great show.
Was the stage of that show then correctly positioned at the end of the arena?
Yes, exactly.
I had a conversation with Jack Bruce about Cream playing at Madison Square Garden under the same circumstances that Jimmy did on that circular stage in the middle of the garden with the public address system being the PA. And I said to him, how the hell could you hear yourself? And he said, you couldn't hear yourself. There was no foldback speakers on the floor. He said the PA was flying over your head, and it wasn't made for music. It was made for public service announcements. He said it was one of the worst experiences of his life. I think we just froze. We have a technical glitch.
Yeah, Eddie's frozen. Can you still hear me just fine?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm not sure what we can do on our end. Hopefully.
Let's see if he can unfreeze himself.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if Eddie can still hear us.
It was going so well.
Well, as long as we've still got connection on this end, yeah.
Yeah, I know. We can always edit. Maybe he has to reconnect.
Yeah, he probably just lost connection would be my guess.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, Eddie.
My computer completely shut down just randomly.
Oh.
Shit.
Oh.
It was starting to go.
Yeah.
And then it just shut down. Hang on a second. I just got to re-enter stuff. I'll be with you in a minute. All right.
All right. So you're going to try to reboot. Is that right?
I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
He's very nice, isn't he?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And all, with, don't feel the need to cut things short. If you're all good on timing, I am as well. As far as this chewing up some time, don't worry about it.
So after Joe Bonamassa, I don't have anybody lined up. I've got
yeah, but sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we've got a good pile up of ones lined up. I think maybe probably about 8 or so, something like that.
Yeah, we do. I want to get the Eddie Ojeda one up there.
Yeah.
Look, Matt, did they? Look, they're putting me under the gun about delivering numbers, and
I know I only got the, when I was on those emails with Kid a bit ago, that was all I've heard of it, but
and I'm saying I'm doing the best I can do, and I am doing the best, and I think we're kicking ass, but if you don't give something time to develop, it's not going to happen. And if they don't want to do that, that's too bad. My attitude is find somebody who does it as well as me. I don't know. You tell me how I do relative to other people, because I don't know how I do relative to other people. I listen to Bob Left sets. It's
all
awful.
right.
Here we go.
Are we back up and running?
Yeah, we're back
up.
We've
got you.
So
weirdest thing. In that last sequence, you were talking, and it started to go a little bit, and I thought, wow, well, it's the Wi-Fi that was doing weird things, and all of a sudden, it went just completely shut. There's a fucking brand new computer. Anyway, carry
hopefully
on.
Matt will do his magic. Yep. So in a conversation I had with Jack Bruce, obviously several years ago before he died, I asked him what it was like when Cream played the Garden, because they played under the same circumstances that Jimmy did on the round stage, and he told me it was awful. He said you couldn't hear anything because the public address system was on top, which was not made for music, number one. Number two, there was no foldback speakers on the bottom, so he couldn't even hear himself. Number three, it's going around in a circle. You can't even get a fix on anything. And I believe after Jimmy's show, I think the Stones went, we're not playing under those circumstances, under any, that's it. Either you put the stage at the end or we're not playing. Because that was a nightmare production situation. But those early days are they're fun in one aspect, in that they were so early and people were figuring things out. And that was the precursor to really the whole Fillmore East run. Now, you and I got into a brief conversation about your history at the Fillmore East and you recording in the Fillmore. And obviously, Jimmy's most successful, famous live album was at the Fillmore, which is Band of Gypsies, which is, of course, I was at that show. But you told me that you produced a lot, or you recorded many acts at the Fillmore. Tell me about how you got that gig and where the studio was, because I'm trying to envision where the hell you were sitting, where they put you in the Fillmore East.
Well, it's such a cool memory for me that is emblazoned in my memory banks, that I was under the stage, literally, as the band were
above
playing.
you could feel the pounding of the music.
Yeah, but there's actually a photograph that Emily Rothschild, who was the house photographer, a fabulous photographer, by the way, she took this picture of me underneath the stage there. And it's an 8-track Scully tape machine, a 12-channel tube console, one LA2A limiter for the techie heads out there, and I think one Shure mixer as well. So maybe I had 12, 13, maybe 14 channels. I don't know, but it was very minimal. And the stage is just right above my head. It was hardly in a room. It was maybe 7 feet, maybe less. And there was this huge sewer pipe that ran kind of just about in front of me and off to the side. So when the bands really got going and pounding away, it scared the shit out. The rats came running down the pipe.
This was a constant in your experience?
It was just, I always remember that. But we got some great, the thing about the Fillmore East was the sound of that room was magnificent. The stage acted like a plenum. It was made of oak floor because it dates back to I think the turn of the century. And the 2,400 people. And the balconies came way down low and almost touched the stage, And I would often stand on that last balcony, which hung over the stage. That's when I wasn't working. And I had my cameras, and that's where I got a lot of great shots of Zeppelin and a bunch of other bands. But that room just resonated beautifully. And the low end was phenomenal. You could just put up the mics, don't worry even about EQ, and it just sounded fantastic.
Yeah, that was Hanley sound back then. And,
yes.
Because I spent so much of my misspent youth at the Fillmore, people say, well, was front row at the Fillmore the best? And I said, no, actually front row of the balcony was the best. Balconies. Yeah. Front row balcony was the place to sit at the Fillmore if you're going to go sitting. Although I have a funny story to tell you, so as you know, the acts at the Fillmore, every week you saw a great act. Every week. It just didn't matter. It was 10 years after. It was Jeff Beck. It was Rod Stewart. It was, Jethro Tull. And people don't even understand how enormously lucky we were to be there at that time in our lives. But we took it for granted because nobody cared. Tickets are $3. I remember when the tickets went up to $3.50, there was a riot on 6th Avenue. No kidding. Bill Graham raised the prices from $3, $4, and $5 to $3.50, $4.50, and $5.50, and there were riots on 2nd Avenue about this. So, anyway, I'm on a typical night, and I'm seeing, I think it was the Kinks and 10 Years After, and it was after Woodstock. So 10 years after, it's huge, right? And of course, I'm sitting there. I can't wait to hear Going Home or whatever. And the Kinks are playing, and I had all this weed with me, so I'm smoking. I got so stoned I fall asleep, during the Kinks. I'm front row, by the way, but I'm 17. So all of a sudden, at some point, someone goes, "Good night," and I turn around to the guy next to me. I said, "Oh, 10 Years After coming on." He goes, "Dude, you slept through the entire 10 Years After show." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The Kinks left. You slept. 10 Years After came on. They just said good night." And I said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" He goes, "I don't know you. You could have killed me." He goes, "As far as I was concerned, you wanted to sleep, man. So go ahead." So, okay. So let's get back to Jimmy and Band of Gypsies. Prior to the Band of Gypsies performance at the Fillmore, which was New Year's Eve, 69-70, how many shows had you recorded at that point and done mixing on?
Well, some of the more well-known ones was Eric Clapton, when he wasn't called Eric Clapton, because um, it was Derek and the Dominoes that did that.
Right.
Oh gosh, two performances of John Mayall, which also were 2 albums.
Did you do the Turning Point or not?
Yep,
The acoustic.
yep.
So I was at that show, by the way, and I have to say, I wasn't expecting, if I'm not mistaken, what's his name? Duster Bennett opened the show, and he was a solo artist who didn't go over well at all. Nobody got it. No one got it. They kind of booed off the stage. And Mayall came out, and I was expecting a blues breaker thing, and instead it was the acoustic thing with Johnny Almond, and it was unbelievable how great that show was.
Yeah, it was. It was just absolutely spectacular.
Was it risky, by the way?
And also, let me just say this, that the sonics of that performance, and you can really hear how acoustic instruments resonate, and it's just bass, acoustic guitar, harmonica. I think it was a sax player as well, right? Yeah.
It was a sax player, and it was super rich sounding, super rich.
Beautiful, and that made for a great record.
So let me, about that show. Did you know going in that it was going to be this acoustic thing, or was this like a risk on his part, or was it all?
It was a risk on his part. I mean, he told me this is what it was going to be, and we mixed it at Electric Lady Studios, and he would come in while we were mixing, and he was putting the liner notes together. He would do it with a pen, with an Indian ink thing, and he would actually, as we were mixing, okay, this goes in this order. So you would have the running on you to write that down, and he'd be drawing up the covers. He was an amazing guy. The other band that, or performance that was really memorable was Mad Dogs and Englishmen with Leon Russell and dearly departed Joe Cocker. That was another ridiculous show.
Can I say, when people say to me, what are the greatest shows you ever saw in your life? And people ask this all, you probably get this all the time. And because I'm the Ancient Mariner in my neighborhood, you've been around. And I say to people, probably the greatest single performance. I say number 2, Rolling Stones at the Garden, 69. And number 3, Zeppelin as the opening act to the Iron Butterfly at the Fillmore in 69. I would say Joe Cocker and Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Leon Russell was perhaps the greatest single show I ever saw. It was, and so that stands out in your mind as well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got to not only record it, but I was present for a lot of the work on it. So
it was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, we share this lovely thing about New York City and the Fillmore, and the boss. I mean, the boss, you would never argue with the boss of the Fillmore East, and Bill. He was tough. Bill, God bless him, man. He would come in. No, I would walk into his office, and he's very intimidating, and he says, "Okay, Kramer, if you F up, I mean, you just don't even have to want to think about coming near this place anymore. So do a good job, you hear?" And he would he'd love to wind me up. Yes, sir.
Whatever you say.
And there's another story about Woodstock. Just to quickly jump, talking about Bill. Please give the folks out there who we're talking about.
Okay, Bill Graham.
Bill Graham
goes down in history as probably the greatest rock promoter, and probably set the table for every rock concert that has ever happened. You know how the Beatles are the gold standard for rock bands. Bill Graham is probably the gold standard for promoters. I mean, he set the table for everything that ever came afterwards, and he had balls of steel, and he had impeccable taste. And he knew what to do. And only Bill Graham could put a bill together with the Woody Herman Jazz Orchestra opening for Led Zeppelin. Only Bill Graham could do something like that.
Crazy, but it worked.
Crazy, yeah.
Anyway, so I'm up at Woodstock. It's the first day. I had arrived at 6 a.m, and I remember walking along this path trying to get to Woodstock, because we actually walked the last three quarters of a mile, because we had to park on the side of the road on the thruway. And I come up over this hill, and the sun's coming up. As we approach the top of this hill, we're looking down at the stage, and the sun's coming up, and I'm looking at the stage, and I'm thinking to myself, what? There is no effing way we're going to be able to record the show starting at 1 o'clock. And you can see cranes juggling beams, workers just running around like mad trying to get the thing together. But finally it gets done. I mean, it was actually done by like, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock. So I'm in and out of the truck, which is about 200 yards behind the stage. And I walk back to the stage, and I had no idea how many people were going to show up. We were told, maybe 100,000. So I'm standing on the stage, and I'm looking out at the sea of people. There must be close to 500,000 people there. And Bill Graham walks up, he stands next to me. He says, "Hey, Kramer, if this audience decides to riot, where." And I said, "Gee, thanks, Bill. I'm going to go back to my truck where I think it's safe. See ya." It was like, "Thanks, Bill. That gives me a real vote of confidence."
Yeah, I feel so much better that I'm here right now.
Yeah. Anyway, Bill Graham.
So, all right, let's then talk about the actual days. Well, because Jimmy played the weekend, and where the recordings were made for Band of Gypsies. I was at one of the shows. I don't remember exactly which one, but I was 10th row center, and I remember thinking to myself, Jimmy was so good at the Fillmore that recording period that I thought I was witnessing the greatest guitar playing I ever saw in my life. So, what is your memory of what it was like at that time when you were recording the Band of Gypsies? Because that was a very short-lived band.
I didn't record that. Actually, I was at the studio because my gig was really to finish Electric Lady, which is what we were involved with very seriously. It was a lot of work, and I think it was recorded by one of the cool recording trucks. I did a good job,
like Wally Hiders or something like
Wally
that.
Hiders, and maybe Abe Jacobs might have done it. I can't remember who was Jimmy's front of house guy. But subsequent to that, Jimmy and I reconvened after probably a couple of weeks afterwards, at a studio in New York called Juggy Sound. Nice little 8-track studio, about Midtown in the 50s. And I remember, we put the tapes up, and we've been listening, and we pretty much narrowed it down to the performances that Jimmy and I were thinking of as going to be this album, which he owed to Capitol, as payoff for an old contract. Right. We all know that story behind the scenes. Right. And we're mixing a track, and it's, of course, Buddy Miles is doing his thing, and he's screaming and yelling and yeah, doing that thing. And you can go on for 10, 15 minutes. And I'm looking at Jimmy out of the corner of my eye, and I can see Jimmy's head. He's got his hat on, and his head is coming further down like this, and he's going down and down and down until his head's on the console and his hat's over his head. And I can hear him say, "I wish Billy would shut the F up, man."
By the way, you can.
I'll never forget that.
You can. We can curse on this if you wish. But that's
I said it.
Yeah, that's fine. So you wish you could shut the fuck. So, okay. So give me the truth to this rumor.
There's no truth to it.
that Jimmy created Band of Gypsies as an all-black band under pressure from the Black Panthers. True or false?
BS.
Okay.
He wanted to have Billy Cox with him, which was a smart move, a wonderful move, an emotional move.
A longtime friend,
longtime friend, army buddy, all of that. They jammed, they played together. It was a time for Jimmy where he was making a shift in his sound and his process of how he wanted to hear the band. And he needed somebody reliable, and certainly Billy was reliable, and a wonderful bass player and a great guy. And I think it really helped stabilize, where Jimmy was at. And then you bring in Buddy Miles, and that's the fireworks to the other part. I mean, and that's where I think the yin and the yang starts to happen, because Buddy, of course, being the showman he was, wanted to kind of take center stage as well as Jimmy. And there's only one Jimi Hendrix, and I think that caused a bit of grief. But as far as the other stuff, maybe there was some subtle rumors and shit going on underneath, but I don't buy that.
Okay. Well, all right. It had floated. It had floated.
I'm sure, inevitably in the 70s, that's what was going on. And I mean, I'm sure, and I know Jimmy talked to those guys. Did they influence him?
Were you at the Randall's Island debacle?
No.
Oh man,
no,
that was
I
crazy.
heard about it. I'm glad I wasn't there.
People just, younger people just can't grasp how many festivals there were on a weekly basis in the summer back in those days. Like every weekend, somewhere in the United States, 200,000 young people got together, and there was a show at Randall's Island, which was eventually hijacked by the Young Lords and not the Black Panthers. And they threw all the doors open, and Jimmy was headlining, and there was all sorts of political pressure on all of that. But eventually, of course, Jimmy did go back to Mitch Mitchell. And I don't know, Eddie, if you remember this, but this is one of the things I'm going to tell my listeners I love about Eddie Kramer. And I hope I don't embarrass you, because I really love you for being as just a normal a person as I could possibly know. Twisted was playing a big festival somewhere in Europe, one of these German metal fests. And I'm getting into a disagreement or an argument with a drummer from another band about drummers' importance of certain bands. And this guy was saying how great Ginger Baker was. And I was saying, okay, yeah, Ginger's fine. I said, but Jimmy was Jimmy because Mitch was more important to Cream than Ginger was Mitch was more important to Jimi Hendrix than Ginger was important to Cream. You could put almost anybody into Cream, but Mitch had that jazzy vibe that gave Jimmy some comfort zone to move around in. And that was my theory. That was what I was saying. He goes, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I said, really? I'm going to call Eddie Kramer and straighten this out. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to call Jimmy. So he goes, you know Eddie Kramer? I go, yeah, he's on my phone. Bullshit. I said, really? I'm going to call Eddie Kramer right now and ask him his opinion. And I called you and you picked up, and I said, hey, Eddie, how you doing? Hey, JJ, how are you? I said, listen, I just want to know your opinion. Do you believe Mitch was more important to Jimmy than Jen? You going, absolutely. And the guy was for nothing else, Eddie, the guy was completely blown away. And I got you on the phone and you gave me this opinion. But talk about Mitch Mitchell for me to Jimmy and what you thought about that.
God bless Mitch Mitchell. I absolutely adore the guy. He was so much fun. Right from the first time I met him, I mean, we got on like a house on fire. He was like, watching him in the studio, he was like a little elf. He was a little guy. He's actually shorter than me. I'm a short Jewish guy, but he was a short English guy. And but watching him in the studio was so intense and fun. And he bounced around on that kit, and you could just, his movements, everything he did was so intuitive, and he grasped what Jimmy was saying, what he was up to, where he was going. And he was actually, he could think in that plane that Jimmy was in, which is quite remarkable, because, Jimmy's on another planet someplace. But he was able to keep up with him, and then sometimes surprise us. I mean, he would do a fill, and I would go, what? And Jimmy would, I remember this, I was watching Jimmy through the glass, and I'm mixing away, getting sounds and stuff, and Mitch does his fill, and Jimmy went, what? He's laughing because the fill was so laughable, it was so impossible that you couldn't help laughing. Mitch had a wonderful sense of humor, and was often the butt of a lot of Jimmy's jokes. I mean, Jimmy would take the piss out of me and Mitch and Noel, and Jimmy would take the piss out of himself. It's a lot of self-deprecating humor. Right. But the sessions was so much fun, and Mitch was just his sensitivity to the songs and how he managed to adjust the tone color of the snare, the foot, where the toms go, where the, in particular the cymbal, his cymbal work was just magnificent. And that's, stems from his jazz beginnings. He was the youngest drummer with the Youth Jazz Orchestra of England or the UK. I think he was 15 or 16 or something like that. And in all the bands he played with before he met Jimmy. Hats off to the guy. Loved him.
So how did he take it when he was replaced by Buddy, and how did he feel when he came back and came over again?
Another remarkable thing happened. Yes, Buddy was there for a specific thing, and Buddy was the most magnificent, fat back, funky guy.
Yeah, R&B drummer, like straightforward, 2/4.
Yeah, but straight ahead and funky and the great foot and all the rest of that. He was fantastic, and it was perfect for the Band of Gypsys, no question. But when Mitch rejoins the band in 1970, after the Band of Gypsys was no more, it was a very interesting thing to observe him in the studio with Billy and Jimmy with the new experience, that would be May of 70, which was when the first time we actually went in the studio. Electric Lady had just opened. Mm-hmm. And I was so surprised when I heard him start to play with Jimmy and Billy. Wow, there's some funk going on here. He's been listening. He was not stupid, He realized he had to make a bit of a shift in his playing to accommodate the new funkier feel, more R&B influenced stuff, and you could really hear it in there.
Like Dolly Dagger stuff, like
yeah, all of that
was a different vibe to it.
Different vibe, but here's the thing. He said to me, yeah, Buddy Miles, yeah, mate, he sounds like a bloody cement mixer, doesn't he? I thought it was brilliant.
I got to say this, Buddy came out of the Electric Flag. He was great for the Electric Flag. I thought the Electric Flag was a really good band that just didn't catch the way Mike Bloomfield expected it to catch, being the guitar star that he was in America. And Buddy came out of that, and then he joined Jimmy. But that was, a great time. So then when Jimmy died, I would like to think that was a confluence of horrible circumstances and coincidences, and not on a death wish in his brain, right? It was just like a big fucking horrible mistake.
Correct.
Right? Not right. Something designed and some sort of a suicidal statement about life.
No. Bullshit.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Because there was too much to live for. I mean, the Isle of Wight, everything, Jimmy was just so great. People say, what would it be like if he was still alive today? You would really love to know what that man could have created. He was amazing. He truly was amazing. But you have exposed yourself with so many phenomenal musicians. Your work with Kiss is legendary. Tell me about
Kiss. Let me think. Kiss. Oh yeah, those guys with the paint. Yeah, and the boots. Yeah. Oh yeah. I know.
So you were familiar with Ron Johnson's Wicked Lester sessions that got.
Well, that's how this whole thing started, because at Electric Lady, I would see Gene and Paul up and down the hallways doing their thing, whatever. And Ron Johnson was their producer, and I think at that time he was also managing the Electric Lady Studios. And he called me up after the disaster of the Wicked Lester album, which went straight in the bloody toilet. And he says, "Listen, Gene and Paul, they got this idea. They want to do a rock and roll band, and would you do a demo for me, because it's kind of not my scene?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely, sure, no problem." So on the appointed day, Gene, Paul, and Ace, I just watching these guys go into Studio B, it was just one of those moments. I mean, when Ace walked into the studio, he was so bloody skinny. He was driving a cab in the Bronx, and I mean, he was so thin. If he turned sideways, you wouldn't even see him. It was. But what a sweet! I love Ace. For me, he was the real heart and soul of the band. Bloody good guitar player, much underrated, I think, by a lot of folks. But it was
probably, by the way, probably, and I said this recently in an interview, and so people gave me some blowback. I said the three guitar players that probably created more desires to become famous and be stars in America are Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, and Ace Frehley. And I said it has nothing to do with Ace's technical ability or lack thereof. It has to do with his star power and what he created as a image. Like he's the American Keith Richards. I'm serious. You know, he is.
No, you know, I'm so glad you said that, because I love Ace. You know, I did the solo records with him. I hung out with him, and just working with that guy, he was fantastic. He, you know, he had his failings like everybody else, you know, but the music he created was wonderful, and a great guitar player, terrific feel.
Yeah, amazing feel. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute. I'm going to take a 60-second break, and we'll come right back. Okay?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of an interview. What, are you calling me? Salt and oil and a little bit of ground pepper, and put them face, when you cut them lengthwise, put them face down so the skins are on the top, and then halfway through, put a spatula underneath them and flip them over to the other side, no more 20. I think so. All right, mate. Bye.
Giving some cooking advice.
Oh, you might want to say that's my friend Greg Godovitz, who's a well-known rocker in Canada. He had a band called Godot in the 70s.
Oh, awesome.
And he was just at the house and he wanted to know how to roast those potatoes. Don't ask. So we can salvage that thing with an edit, right?
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah, I
no
figured.
problem at all. Yep.
Yeah.
Eddie, everything okay so far? Everything cool?
Oh, this thing sucks. What do you want?
Matt, did I tell you or did I not tell you?
Yeah, it sucks. So are we going to get off Jimi Hendrix and go to
we're just, we moved to Kiss. Did you forget, or did that addle brain of yours?
I thought you wanted to do a thing about Pierre Fournier, the cello player who I recorded in 1967. The French man, you know, he played beautiful cello. Okay. I mean, if you want me to do voiceovers, okay, I can. Hey, no problem. Hey, Joe, I got this guy. You know, his name he's a bit JJ French. What the fuck is that guy? I don't know. He's French, man, but he sounds like he's fucking from New York. Get out of here.
You could have you started off the call saying hello in a voice. You could have stuck with it. I would have bought it.
You know,
I love doing voices. Ever since I was a kid, I love doing voices.
Well, I could do that. You fucking guys, the three of you fucking guys. You fuck with me, I'm gonna fucking make a pie out of your first fucking born, you fucking asshole. You know, I seen the three of yous. All right. I see. By the way, I always thought I still thought the Sopranos should do a version of the Sopranos version of the Three Stooges. James Gandolfini would be Curly, right? And Paulie would be Larry. I mean, and Mo, James would be Mo. And instead of the fingers, it would be two ice picks, you know, it'd be like, bing. All right. Anyway, we're back. Right. We're back with Mr. Sirius. So we're back here with Mr. Kramer. We're talking a little bit about Kiss, of course, a minor band, but Eddie was extremely instrumental in some of the biggest records, including the Kiss Live album, which really kind of set the stage and really made them, huge, absolutely huge. But I want to talk a little bit about the Rolling Stones and about Olympic Studios. And a lot of times people think when they listen to my podcast, it's a little inside baseball. Well, it has to be, because we have a history here. We bring people on here who have important history, and I bring people on that matter. Olympic Studios is one of the most important studios in the world. Jimmy Miller was a great producer, the Rolling Stones. You were at ground zero for so many important things. And when people talk to me about the Stones who don't really familiarize themselves, I always say, start off with Beggar's Banquet and move forward. go to Beggar's Banquet, go to Let It Bleed, go to Sticky Fingers, and end up in Exile, and you've seen enough of the Rolling Stones. If you don't get it after that, you ain't going to get it. So tell me a little bit about your feeling about Jimmy Miller, a bit about Beggar's Banquet, a bit about the Stones during that period of time.
Well, when you mentioned Jimmy Miller and the Stones, I sit here in front of you and I get the chills, because
and Jimmy Miller, by the way, everybody is a producer, famous producer.
My relationship with Jimmy Miller started actually with a band called Traffic, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and Steve Winwood. We did I'm the Man, and that was great. Jimmy came
Dear
over.
Mr. Fantasy, the
Mr.
first
Fantasy.
album was Dear Mr. Fantasy, essentially. It was the big hit.
Jimmy Miller came from the States to England at the invitation of Chris Blackwell, who owned Island Records, because Chris thought that he would be very good for Traffic, and it was a magnificent bringing together of two very talented parties, and I was the engineer on that, and I worship what Jimmy Miller brought to the table, not only for Traffic, but then subsequently with the Stones. I think he was one of the best producers I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And
May I just interject, by the way, that Paper Sun is one of my favorite songs. Heaven is in Your Mind is astonishing. The material on that record and that band and the talent in that band with Dave Mason and Stevie Winwood was extraordinary.
Oh, and Jim Capaldi on
Jim Capaldi on drums, of course, and Chris Wood.
It was wonderful. Anyway, the working relationship with Jimmy Miller and the Rolling Stones was, I think, magical and sorely needed, because the band was, they're the Rolling Stones, and they've been doing some good stuff. But when you look at the previous, like just before Jimmy gets involved, you've got Satanic Majesties and some, it's a little verkackt, And seeing him in the studio, interacting with Mick, with Charlie, with the whole band, it was wonderful, because he was able to just grab him and just shake him up and say, come on, this is how we're going to do it. And he had so much energy and such a great sense of humor that they were inspired by him. And he just turned their sound around, and he said, let's go back. Come on, man, let's get down, get funky. I don't know if he actually used those words, but that's how it appears to me in my brain. And just the interaction. Here's a beat, and he would show Charlie, here's the beat, man, here's how it goes, and Charlie would look at him and like, oh, okay. And then I don't get it. Jimmy, give me the sticks. He would sit on the kit. Okay, Charlie, here it is. Oh, you mean like that, mate? All right, I got it. And I think Jimmy actually did play drums on some of the tracks.
Yeah. When it comes to the sound of these artists that you work with, how invested are you personally in getting the guitar sounds and suggesting the amplifiers, for example, and this sounds like this and this sounds like this? Like where does that fit in to you?
When it came to the earlier stuff, I would never make any suggestion about an amplifier. That came later. I mean, if Jimi Hendrix says I'm playing through, a cardboard piece of shit, I'm going with it.
I'm playing through a cardboard piece of shit, right? Okay.
Certainly in those days, no. Being responsible for putting the mic in the right place, getting into the control, figuring out the sound, and how on earth do I take Jimmy's sound or Keith's sound or Jimmy Page's sound and improve it or interpret it in such a way that I think I know what they're looking for. Maybe Jimi Hendrix would say, hey man, I want some green stuff on there, man. I would go, yeah, green. Okay, I got it. So
what did you interpret that to be?
Well, I was going to say that Jimmy and I had a color code thing going. No pun intended, no disrespect here. But red, it's a mild form of distortion. Purple was like max. Green was reverb. And then there's all the different other tones of color, brown and black and all these things. They all had different meanings, but I knew exactly where he was going with it. But if you want to just quickly jump over the hoop and go back to Jimmy Miller and the Stones,
right.
Just watching Jimmy figure out how to get the band at it, get them just like they just can't wait to get in there and just bang it and get it. And he'd be there. If they weren't doing it, he'd be right up in their face, man, you know. And then maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would back off and just relax and have a joint or whatever and crack jokes because he was very good at it. So the atmosphere was this wonderful roller coaster thing. It was genius.
Well, people ask me, what does a producer do? And I said, a producer has to do a lot of things. And a producer can be either the most hands-on person on the planet who knows every aspect of every button and every switch and knows arrangements and knows songs. And it could be all that. And it can be, or a producer can be a vibe guy who just happens to be liked by the band and sets a good tone. Or the greatest producers can do a little of all of it. You have to be a babysitter, you have to be a vibe person, you have to kind of understand, and you have to have the respect of the band because the band has to believe that you know what they're trying to do. And because you're at the nexus of so many spectacular artists, first of all, do you ever look back and go, my God, man, I was just born at the right place at the right time, and what a freaking amazing life I've had. Because it's astonishing. Eddie, it really, truly is astonishing, the projects you've been involved in, the artists you've been in. But do you ever think about that, like the totality of it?
It's interesting you say it. Now I have the time to sort of sit back and go, oh, I was pretty lucky, I guess, to be in the right place at the right time. During the time when you're there, all you can think about is saving your ass, making sure
doing the job. Right.
You've got to do your job. And if you don't do your job, and this thing we talked about earlier about trying to stay ahead of the curve, that's so critical. You have to be ahead of where you got to reinterpret what the artist is thinking. Oh, he's going down that path, or she's going down that path. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Let me see if I can kind of just gently swing that person back. You always must allow the artist the complete, I wouldn't say complete freedom, but the freedom to be able to express themselves and go whatever direction they want to go in, but with the view that, okay, if you stray too far over there and it gets too crazy and silly, and you know it's going to be non-productive, you try to bring them back without, occasionally sometimes actually the best weapon I have in the studio, when people ask me, how do you get a great vocal sound from the artist? I say, well, you set them up nicely, you have a booth with a nice light over their lyrics, turn the lights down in the studio, candles, whatever. But if they really get obstreperous, I have a 2x4 with like 9-inch nails through the top. You go in the studio and just wallop.
Done.
That's it. Next.
So with your involvement with the Stones, with Jimmy, with Zeppelin, and all of the attendant rumors of drug and alcohol abuse that all these acts apparently either did or were accused of doing, how would you say they acted when it came time to making their records?
They had to put up or shut up. I mean, geez, I don't know how to answer that.
Were you ever concerned that extracurricular activities were affecting sessions, or did everyone bring it when they needed to bring it?
I would say 90% of the time, artists realize, hey, we're in the studio, we got to do this, and we got to get it right. And there's that other 10% where the drug thing really could affect their performance, and the session would just crumble, and then we call it a night. Okay, we come back another day. And I did see a hell of a lot of that. There was no question. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, certainly the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, I mean, the record budgets were huge, and there was a lot of excess, and people would take 6 months to make a record. Never. I will never, ever, ever do that. That's not the way to make music. What was
it like watching Jimmy Page work as a producer in the studio?
Oh, the best. Wonderful. To this day, I still say Page was and probably still is. I don't know if he was making any more records, but he certainly had the direction and the knowledge and the force. And, this is what I was going to say about the two Jimmys, Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix. Here are two gentlemen who had a vision. And that vision was, this is the song, and here's how I hear it. And when we are on this path to record this thing, I know exactly what it's going to sound like. And my gig was to sort of get on that train and say, okay, I know where you're going with this. Let me help you get to that point. So both Jimmys were visionaries and were able to execute with complete concentration on the end goal.
What about the rumor that Jimmy Page was the guitar player on You Really Got Me, as opposed to Dave Davies doing that guitar work? Any comment about the truth to that story?
I was on the session. I think it was him, but it is 1960.
You thought it was Jimmy, or you thought it was Dave? I'm sorry.
I thought it was Jimmy, but
okay.
Jimmy Page says no, maybe it was Dave. In my head, it was it's a long time ago. Yeah. I know he did play a bunch of stuff on that record, whether it was rhythm guitar, whether it was lead. I like to think he did.
He was on thousands of sessions, wasn't he?
I did.
I did a session guy, wasn't he?
I recorded. It was a very fun session. I did this session at Olympic in '67, and it was Jimmy Page on guitar, John Paul Jones on bass, Clem Catini on drums, and the session was Hurdy-Gurdy Man, and it was Mickey Mose producing. And John Paul Jones was the first of the Zeppelin guys that I'd met much earlier, because he was always in and out of Olympic. I remember him walking into Olympic, bass over one shoulder, the scores under his right arm, and kind of dragging a B-15 bass amp in. He would go to the conductor's rostrum, because he would be doing the arrangement for a pop chart, put the score on the conductor's rostrum, plugged in the bass, we put a little screen around it, and he would take the bass in his hand and literally conduct the whole 60-piece orchestra with the bass in his hand. It was genius.
When Twisted worked with you and we were doing the demos at Electric Lady, you were the first person that made us aware of the fact that our drummer had a timing issue. Seeing that you've worked with some of the greatest drummers in the world, tell me, or the people listening to the show, the key to all of it, how important the drummer is, and getting that right to set the stage for an entire song.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of everything is the basis. I mean, we look to the drummer as the foundation, whether it's any bloody drummer, it doesn't matter. Some drummers were a little challenged by that. I mean, in modern day, of course, we have click tracks and all the rest of that bullshit, which I hate, but you have to go with it. You now can actually program a click track to have a slight movement.
To sound human in a way.
To sound more or less human, but there's still nothing better than having a great drummer with great feel and the band all sensing where, okay, here's the verse, but maybe the chorus just lifts a little bit and then it comes back to I mean, I love all that. That's humans interaction, which is what we're missing with the bloody COVID, right?
Did you work with Jim Keltner and Jim Gordon, those guys?
I did. They were on
with Joe,
with Joe Cocker on that magical live album,
amazing,
Fillmore East.
Tell me, do you remember exactly the situation that led you to come to see Twisted Sister the night that you saw us at that club in Westchester?
Absolutely.
Tell me.
We were living in Bedford in Westchester County, and our bank was somewhere in the town, and I just happened to I'll give you an edit point. I happened to mention to my bank manager, a lovely lady, that I was going to see. No, wait, I'm sorry. Scratch all that. We've got to do a re-edit. I remember going into the bank, and I was talking to a bank manager, and she said, hey, there's this band. I really love them. They're called Twisted Sisters. They're playing tonight. You should go and see them. I said, yeah, okay, fine. I'll drive down and have a listen. So your band was recommended to me by my bank manager. And I went down there to see you guys, and I was blown away. And that's how we got started.
And here's the flip side of it on our side. We finished our sound check. That was the summer of '79, and it was a gas crisis. So people were not going to the clubs in the amount that we normally expected. Normally we were playing to full rooms all the time, but the gas crisis was causing a lot of problems in terms of the attendance records. Plus it was raining that night. And so we finished our sound check, and this girl walks up to me and she goes, "Hey, by the way, I want you to know something. This guy named Eddie Kramer, he's coming down to see you tonight." And I'm like, "Why would you even know who Eddie Kramer is? What are you talking about?" She goes, "My mother works at a bank, and she says that Eddie Kramer came in and she told him about the band, and he said he's going to come and see you guys." And I walk in the dressing room. I said, "According to this girl who just walked up to me, Eddie Kramer's coming." And of course, the guys are going, "Get the fuck out. Like, Eddie Kramer's not coming up to this club, Detroit and Portchester. What the fuck? What is it? Why he's even in Westchester? He's an English guy. He's not like, you believe this girl?" I said, "Listen, I'm only telling you what she said. I'm not telling you that it's fact. I just said that she told me that her mother told him and he's coming down." And, the band was very consistent in its performance. It didn't matter how many people were in the room or who was there. We were going to put on the show. And you showed up in the middle of the summer in the gas crisis when the club was not particularly crowded, if I'm not mistaken. And you walked backstage and we were like, "Oh my fucking God," and that was it. And that's how we met. And you took us to Plaza Sound to start off with. And I got great photos of us at Plaza Sound. If you need any, I got great shots of it. And it became a really important part of our history, because the demos, which we all thought were going to get us signed pretty quickly. In fact, here's what I remember. I'm going to divert a little bit. When we were working on "I'll Never Grow Up Now," you wanted us to listen to a John Mellencamp track because you liked the way the hand clapping or something about the track sounded, and you felt it was important to be in that song. And so you had just been working with John, I would assume, because you had which Mellencamp record did you work?
That would have been way later. I think I just
later, because you definitely used it as a reference for us. You said, "I want you to listen to this Mellencamp track," because maybe you hadn't worked with him yet, but you liked the way it sounded. And you kind of said, and we kind of like, okay, that was it. And eventually, for those who follow Twisted, "I'll Never Grow Up Now," and the track and "Under the Blade," recorded by Eddie, eventually wound up on these independent singles that wound up in England and wound up being heard by these metal guys, and wound up getting us the deal that eventually got us signed to Secret Records. So that was Eddie's. That was our intersection with Eddie Kramer in the midst of all of the legendary stories of Twisted Sister's failures, where we say we were turned down more times than a bedsheet in a whorehouse, but have come back more times than Freddy Krueger. So yes, it is true. Eddie was there at the beginning, and he saw a good show in the middle of the gas crisis. But I really love the fact that your memory of how it happened is consistent.
Absolutely.
With my memory.
What were the other tracks I cut with you guys?
I think you did "Under the Blade" and "I'll Never Grow Up Now," and I think "Ladies Boy," maybe.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. And then Rob Friedman was your engineer.
Yep.
And a year later, we went back in with him and cut "Bad Boys of Rock and Roll," and that was the second single that went out. I guess before we close this out, any particular memories? You worked with Mott, right? You did work with Mott for a bit. Mm-hmm. Which records did you work with on Mott?
I know, all I remember is we were in England at the Manor Studios, and remember saying hi to Sir. Well, he wasn't Sir then, was he? Virgin Records geezer.
Richard
Branson.
Branson, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't Sir then. I remember saying hi to Richard, and he was walking his big Irish setter. No, not Irish setters. They were Irish wolfhounds on the property. Look, I love the band. I thought that Mott the Hoople were fantastic. All of the members of the band were great musicians, a lot of fun to be with, and we had a blast recording there. That was wonderful. It was a good time.
And the two Beatles sessions you were involved with?
All You Need Is Love, which I did, and also Baby You're a Rich Man.
So All You Need Is Love. We're talking about the live one that was broadcast to 1 billion human beings. We're talking about that, or that All You Need Is Love, because that was done there. What the hell was that like? What was the pressure like to do that? Following Sgt. Pepper. I mean, the band was at the peak of its, I guess the band was probably more lauded in terms of its critical acceptance at that moment in time than any time in their career. The pressure must have been massive to make that work.
Well, the Beatles actually came to Olympic twice. They the first time they came was to do Baby You're a Rich Man. They couldn't get into EMI. Both times they couldn't get into their own bloody studio, which is hilarious.
It was booked out to someone else.
Well, I mean, don't forget, EMI had 2 or 3 studios, but
Right.
it was booked and they couldn't get in. And hey, so who do they call? Olympic, because we were cool. We were independent. We weren't controlled by any of the major labels. Because you know what happened in those days, the EMI, Pi, Philips, Decca, all of those labels had their own studios, and they insisted that the artist record in those studios. But and on this occasion, they couldn't get in. They said, Olympic, yeah, we know these guys. In fact, the Beatles had already been there to help the Stones sing background vocals. So it was a night, but still having the Beatles come to Olympic was like, okay, rock royalty is coming. We're doing the Stones and Hendrix and Traffic and all the rest of that. That was great and fantastic, but Beatles were on a slightly different level in some ways, So that session was done. That was great. And then they come back for All You Need Is Love, and I get the call to do the session. And they walk in. Hey guys, how you doing? And John sits next to me at the producer's desk, pulls out an acoustic guitar and starts jamming. All you need is love, ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. And I'm thinking, Christ, how am I gonna get? He wants to sit there and he wants to sing while they're in there. Bing.
That's what he wanted. That was the original idea.
Well, that's what I surmised.
Okay.
He didn't say, but you interpret, you got to keep your brain going. And I quickly figured out how to patch the vocal mic, which was the talkback mic, into the headphones. And the guys are just walking out into the studio. There goes Sir George Martin. Oh, yes, chaps, I think I'll play this harpsichord over here. And Paul goes out to the studio and says, oh, this string bass over here, I think I'll play this string bass, It belonged to a friend of, actually, it was my boss, Keith Grant. It was his bass. And he just picks it up, just, right, quick, bring the bloody mic over. And
let me just set the scene for everybody. This is the broadcast.
No.
This was the track.
This is the track.
This is the track.
This is
that led to the actual track. Okay.
No, you couldn't do it. You wouldn't do it.
So what did they do live? Did they play to the? What did they?
So let me finish the story.
Please do.
Let me do a little.
You're the guest of the show.
Forgaddling here. I have to get the chief rabbi to sign off on this thing. So he starts off and he's going 2, 3, all you need is, and he's singing away and the band's in there. We've got the sounds together. We start recording. Now in those days, it's a piece of tape on a 10-inch reel at 15 IPS. It's a half hour. And hit record, boom, off we go. And 2, 3, and next take. But they don't stop. There is no stopping. They get through the end of the track, the end of the song, and he's going, 2, 3, all you need. And we get to the end of the tape. It must have been 20 odd takes, with full starts, maybe less. And we get to the end of the tape and he says, all right, hey, come on in, everybody come inside. All right, everybody troops back into the control room. And John says, oh, can you wind back to from the end, please? Actually, he used a different voice. He said, can you wind back to from the end, please? And we did, played it back. Everybody's listening. Everybody looks at him, everybody. All right. Yeah, okay, thank you, goodbye. And that was it. 3 hours, done, out the door, take the tape. Now they took that tape to EMI and they overdubbed to that. And then that was broadcast as live stuff was being sung to it as well.
Oh, so they had the backing track. Is the
Oh,
point.
you had to. You can. It was a bloody great big orchestra.
Yeah, and not only that, but it was live to 1 billion people, right? It was the largest. I think it was the largest broadcast of a single performance in
I
history.
doubt whether it was 1 billion. I don't know if that figure's correct, but it was a lot. It was the first time ever.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, Eddie,
But we got to go.
We've been at a nexus of many of the greatest performances in the history of rock, and you're at the nexus of the JJ French Connection podcast. And I want to thank you so much for being my guest. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, JJ.
It's really been great, and I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future live.
I hope so.
All right, my friend.
Cheers. Goodbye,
You take
everybody.
care.